is so insanely bad.
Does anyone try to explain why it's good?
Why get so mad about this? People get upset about all the wrong things.
I can make that. I don't give a fuck who made it. Fuck you, eat shit.
Wow. Joe Rogan certainly is angry about this painting. I'm not sure why he's so angry about this painting. But this video is not actually about Joe Rogan. This video is about art. And Joe Rogan's not the only person who gets mad about art. I don't know why people get so mad about art. I mean, this particular painting isn't hurting anyone. It hasn't hurt any children. It hasn't killed anybody. It hasn't destroyed anything. It's not stealing money from anyone. It's not destroying the environment. It just sits on a wall. And yet paintings like this can create such a reaction in people. And usually that reaction is, this isn't any good. This is stupid. I could do this. Just like Joe Rogan's reaction. So there's a lot to unpack here in these comments. And I'm going to try to take each part one by one.
What is the painting in question? This painting is an untitled painting by an artist named Cy Twombly, sometimes called 06 Gata because that is written in the painting. It's oil and crayon on wood panels, 6 panels. It is 99 inches by 219 inches. So it's basically 8 feet high and 16 feet wide. So that's a fairly large painting. Now what about this painting? Here we see a series of red, rose-like images painted on a white ground. So it seems simple at first glance. It has one basic color against a more or less single color ground. And it has one kind of form, that rose form. So in that sense, this artist is trying to reduce the elements of the painting down in a kind of minimalist way, although it's not a minimalist painting. So we basically have an expressionistic but minimalistic large-scale painting. That's the painting that has upset Joe Rogan.
Does anyone try to explain why it's good?
So now we come to the question of why is it good?
The first thing I want to say about looking at this painting, or any painting, is that to truly understand the painting, it must be contextualized within the history of art and within culture. It's sort of like if somebody heard, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and that's the only thing they ever knew about the Beatles, and they think, well, what's so great about the Beatles? Well, you have to put that in context with all of their albums and all of their music over the years in the context of the culture of the 60s. And then it makes sense. Oh, the Beatles changed music.
But to understand why this painting is good, and the contributions that Cy Twombly has made as an artist, we have to go to what is called abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism was a major art movement in the 40s and 50s, and it was primarily developed in the United States, and it was the first time in Western art history that United States was considered the forefront of modern art because of this artwork, which interestingly, many of these artists were immigrants. There's 3 major things going on in this art: existentialist philosophy, World War II, and the end of the Industrial Revolution, and the end of the utopian belief that technology would save humanity, and creating large, oversized, expressionistic, heroic paintings. Sometimes people call it action painting. It was about being super, super aggressive with these massive, large strokes and massive brush strokes and big brushes and gobs of paint and building texture and drips and layers. This was a physical, aggressive kind of painting. This is like the football of the painting world. These artists were being super, super aggressive and dynamic with their work. Conceptually, this work was developed during World War II and then the Cold War. And so what do we have here? We have the massive carnage of World War II and the development of the atomic age, which led to atomic weapons and the use of atomic weapons on human beings. So that was a lot of angst, right? Coming out of World War II. That was a terrible time in the 20th century. And so that is sort of hovering over this process, right? This acting out of this angst with physical painting. So then later in the 70s and into the 2000s, artists started to use that really aggressive brushwork and paintwork and physical way of painting, but yet creating more, shall we say, joyful, optimistic paintings. And one of those painters, for example, here is Joan Mitchell, who paints these floral-like, really beautiful, but really aggressive, organic, natural forms. So there's a whole new take on that kind of expressive, dynamic, large-scale painting. And so that's where Cy Twombly lives. Now, this painting in question is part of a series of paintings that Cy Twombly made called Blooming, a Scattering of Blossoms and Other Things. And he made a significant number of these paintings, of which this is one. So when we're considering this painting, we have to consider scale. What's it like to make a 16-foot painting? Now, one thing you have to understand is that when you're painting one part of that painting, you cannot see all the other parts of the painting at the same time. But yet you have to reconcile how each part of that large painting relates and fits in with each other part of that painting, even though you can't see it while you paint it. That's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is, since it's 8 feet high, some of this has to be painted on a ladder. So how aggressive can you be painting physically when you're on a ladder? So you have to sort of figure out that physicality piece of it. The next thing is, you have to consider how big the marks are. Those marks are really large, those swooping brush strokes to create those large forms. Some of those roses are 4, 5, 6 feet wide. They're immense. And so you have to fill that whole space with energy. Now, to give you a context of scale, if you'll notice, to the left center of the painting above that rose, there's some handprints that are his handprints, and he did often paint with his hands. And so you get a sense of scale by, oh my God, that's his handprint. So you get a sense of how big that is and how big the rose is and how much energy it's going to take to make those shapes. Now, aesthetically, I mentioned that it's all reduced down to basically 2 colors. I mean, there's variety within those 2 colors, but 2 colors and 1 form. So a big part of this is how you recreate the same form over and over without ever doing it the same. And if you notice, every single one is different than every single other one. In placement, how close they are to each other, in whether they're filled in or not, how many squiggles they have versus flat red, the shape of the form, the edges of the form, right? Some have little smeared edges, some have tighter edges, some have edges that drip, some have edges that don't drip. Even the drips, like some flowers have more drips than other flowers, and you need to be able to control that. And then placement, some of them are on the edge, going off the edge of the picture plane, which, when I say picture plane, I mean the whole outside of the painting. That's really important, that not everything's floating in the middle, because that creates a very static composition. So he's really working with the idea of both reduction, but also variety at the same time. And that's kind of the major aesthetic juxtaposition of the painting. Reduction, or similarity versus difference. Similarity versus difference.
Please consider, if you're enjoying this video at all, or if this video is pissing you off, please think about liking and subscribing and supporting the channel. I could certainly use some more subscribers like everyone else on YouTube. I'm trying to establish myself and possibly make a little bit of income from this, even though I really like doing it, and my primary goal is to help people understand art and contemporary art. So I would love your support.
I can make that.
Now my favorite part. I can make that. Well, my first answer, Joe, is I dare you. So my first question is, Joe, what is the biggest painting you've ever made, by the way? You ever made a painting that's 2 feet? Have you ever made a painting? 4 feet? 6 feet? 8 feet? So, Joe, go out and get yourself 6 wooden panels, and you have to figure out what kind of wood you're going to use, and assemble that in a 9-foot by 16-foot rectangle. And then you got to figure out, what are you going to prime it with? What are you going to use to make the ground to paint on that wood? Then you got to figure out, okay, well, what are you going to use? What kind of paint are you going to get? What color paint are you going to get? Are you going to get one kind of red or 2 kinds of red? Because there's actually multiple reds in this painting when you look closer. The next thing is, what kind of mediums are you going to mix with that paint? How are you going to get it to drip the way those paintings drip? I mean, anybody can drip paint, but can you drip paint in a way that you're actually controlling the drip even though you're not controlling the drip? Right? Like by the consistency of the paint, how fast it drips, how viscous it is, whether it all goes into one drip or creates multiple drips, if it all drips at the same length or you have variety of drips. You have to figure out what kind of brushes you're going to use, Joe. How big are the brushes that you're going to use? And how big are the arm movements that you're going to use? And how fast are you going to have to move your arm to make those marks? And how are you going to make those exact specific edges? How are you going to get certain densities of paint? Is this all painted wet in wet paint, or is this painted wet over dry paint? And is there white painted in the white or not? And how do you get those ghost images? Do you cover them up with paint, or do you use some kind of thin paint, or do you use some kind of thin paint and cover it up with white paint? Is there white paint in the red paint? Do you have to paint some of that white in there? Can you make the different varieties of squiggles, and some of them are thicker and thinner and faster and slower? So I dare you. Now I will say, there are some painters who could paint this, who could replicate this. That doesn't change anything. There are all kinds of musicians who replicate other people's music. That does not change what those musicians did. I mean, somebody can write a book, and then I can write that book. So, I didn't write the first book, right? To be in the field, the discipline of study, and to understand the context of that, and how one artist can create their voice within a multitude of voices in a unique way and still maintain excellence of material and composition. That is not an easy thing. There is a reason some art is in museums, because those artists achieve a kind of excellence that most artists don't achieve, right? It's sort of like the Hall of Fame for sports.
Doesn't make any sense. There's no sense to this. There's zero sense to that being worth $40 to $60 million. I don't give a fuck who made it. I don't give a fuck where he's from, where he went to school, who he mentored under. Fuck you, eat shit. That's not $40 million.
Now the last part. That's not worth $40 million. I actually don't know how much this painting sold for. I'm going to assume it was sold for $40 million, which is one of the reasons Joe Rogan's all pissed off. Now, I'm not sure who he's pissed off at. Is he pissed off at the artist because the painting sold for $40 million? I mean, what's that got to do with the artist? The artist makes the work. The galleries and the art world set the price, and the collectors set the price. That doesn't have much to do with the artist. The second thing, in a case like this was sold at auction. This was most likely bought by a speculator, an investor, who then turned around and sold the painting at a later date at auction. And so Cy Twombly's not getting that money, right? The auction house and the collector is getting that money. So you have to understand, art is a commodity. And people invest in art, they buy art in the hopes that it will increase in value. And as Cy Twombly got older and then died in 2011, because he can't make any more work, his work becomes more valuable. Then those collectors sell that to other collectors. That's the art market. That has nothing to do with the artist. Who knows what he got for this painting? Maybe this painting sold for $10,000 the first time in a gallery and he got half of that or 40% of that. So I'm not really sure who you're pissed at, Joe. Are you pissed at the collector for paying the money? See, this is the piece that people miss. You say, well, this painting's not worth $40 million. Well, if somebody paid $40 million for it, then it's worth $40 million because they paid for it. And why would someone pay $40 million for any painting? You know why? Because some people have so much money that you cannot comprehend it. Right? They might be able to buy this painting for $40 million the way you could buy something for $450 or $4,000. Would you buy an investment for $400 or $4,000? If he has $1 billion and he buys a painting for $40 million, he still has $960 million. Right? $960 million. So it's a whole different context. Of course, you and I can't pay $40 million for a painting, but that's not about the painter. That is about capitalism. Now, the other thing about when you buy a painting, this collector is not just buying a painting, he is buying a Cy Twombly painting, which is part of a collection, right? His contribution to the art world, which was significant. So as you see these other images, he didn't make one painting like this. He made hundreds and hundreds of paintings like this, right? He was incredibly productive. He made a contribution to the discipline. It's like, well, he didn't hit one home run. He hit 699 home runs. Right? In the context, like in the baseball context. So I hope that kind of helps Joe and everyone else kind of understand art a little bit more, understand the painting a little bit more, understand the context of the art world a little bit more. And I want to encourage you all, when you come across a painting or a piece of art you don't understand, relax. It's a piece of art. Just try to see it for what it is. Like this last painting here that looks like scribbles. It's kind of cool looking. It just is what it is. Can you just enjoy it and look at it without having to make it something? Now, the last thing sometimes people say about Cy Twombly, oh, it looks like kids' art. Well, trying to make art like kids' art is incredibly difficult. And I actually talk about that in a different video, which is on the channel. But the other thing is, kids' art's actually pretty cool looking. If you just look at it, it's like, oh, wow. Look at all those weird angles. Look at all that energy in the marks. That's pretty cool. Right? 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, their art is really powerful and fun and energetic and spontaneous and unself-conscious. And then what happens? You know, by 8th grade, the kid is like making a little tiny thing in the middle of the page that has no energy whatsoever because they're all worried about it. 4-year-olds don't worry about it. So as a mature artist, to work like this, you have to not worry about it. And as an adult, that is not an easy thing to do. So, there you go. Cy Twombly. Hope you enjoyed the video. Check out my other videos. Check out the page. And hopefully we'll see you next time.